Well, joining me now is Ivan Sampson, the CEO of Privatus Law and a specialist in immigration law. Good evening and thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Nigel. It's a pleasure.
Now, I understand that one of her proposals is to say that any migrant in those boats will be classified effectively as being a criminal and could face up to 4 years in prison. Is that really practical?
Well, entering the UK illegally has been a criminal offence since 1971. This is nothing new. But the problem that Priti Patel had is that those entering UK territorial waters were arriving and not entering. So until they actually disembarked onto UK land, went through immigration control, they hadn't committed an immigration offence and a criminal offence under the 71 Act. So she had to bring in a new legislation to make arriving in itself a criminal offence. So even if the migrants are intercepted in UK territorial waters, it's then classed as a criminal offence, even if they haven't actually disembarked onto UK land.
Right, but I mean, at the moment, the thousands that come get put up in four-star hotels or private accommodation. I mean, the idea that they're going to be put in prison, given that our prisons are full, I mean, it's pretty much a non-starter, isn't it? I mean, surely, given that the Human Rights Act is still on the statute book, there'd be mass objections to that.
I think it's going to be a challenge for this country to process possibly tens of thousands of people. We simply don't have the facility to put these people into prison. So what you could have is perhaps suspended sentences. So then they're going to be looked after in the community at the taxpayer's expense.
Yeah, and Ivan, you know, as I understand it, ever since 1951, and we got the Geneva Convention, the UN Declaration on Refugee Status, and we all knew what the terms of a genuine refugee were, but we also understood that you claim that refugee status in the first safe country that you came to. And given that clearly all of these people are coming directly from France, I mean, surely we don't need, on that basis, to actually accept anybody. Why don't we return people back to France?
Well, this is a problem for this country because the receiving state has to accept them. That's the first. And what Priti Patel has done in the New Borders Bill is to threaten these countries with sanctions. For example, they could refuse visas from citizens of those countries unless they accept these refugees. I mean, look, Article 31 of the Refugee Convention prohibits penalisation of refugees. The way the UK government get around this is that the Refugee Convention is actually not effective in UK law. And they also say that the distinction is the mode of transport. So if you're coming directly from a country where you fear persecution to the UK, it's not a criminal offence. If you come via a third country, it then becomes a criminal offence. So there's a distinction between, there's a differential treatment on the mode of transport. So you can actually come with a false passport on an aeroplane using false identities, claim asylum at the airport, and that's not a criminal offence. But if you come via a third country, it will shortly become a criminal offence.
Now, if we took the Australian solution and we just put those boats under tow and took them straight back to Calais and Boulogne, what would the international reaction to that be?
I think it's going to be difficult under our current membership of the Refugee Convention. We're signed up to that treaty. So if people claim asylum in UK territorial waters, we've got an obligation under that convention to process that application. I mean, Priti Patel is talking about having refugee centres offshore.
Yes.
There have been prison ships in this country for many years. I've visited a few myself. So the government is proposing having ships or oil rigs, or even there's talk of third countries like Rwanda and having a refugee camp there. And they're in discussion with the government of Denmark to do such a pilot scheme.
Yeah, but Australia did do this. You know, in 2012, the Australians, Tony Abbott was the Prime Minister, they simply towed those boats back to Indonesia, and perhaps they found themselves in breach of the UN Convention, but it worked, didn't it?
I can't really comment on whether it worked or not. I don't have the information about that. What I will say is this, though, that as long as we're members of the Refugee Convention, we have an obligation to process asylum claims. And it's right that we do that because we've got obligations under international treaty law.
Ivan, thank you very much indeed. Well, there's the argument of the sort of legal, international legal pickle and treaty pickle that we got ourselves into. But what I'm absolutely certain of, is that the numbers that are coming will go up, and September will be the peak month. And I think you're going to see days with very, very large numbers of people. And I frankly think it's wrong to give another 54 million to the French government if their naval boats are escorting those illegal migrant boats into British waters. Please tell me whether you agree or disagree. GB